Welcome back to the podcast. Today, I had the pleasure to speak to a man called Phillip Cox-Hynd, who you are shortly going to meet. He is a behavioural change expert and one of the leading people in his field of work. He's an author and also a mindfulness expert, practitioner, master practicing mindfulness. He uses mindfulness techniques in his work, and he's developed some really powerful programs and growth-led strategic situations going into businesses and allowing the businesses to really understand change in a different way. He calls it change by choice. And our conversation really taps into this change by choice methodology and how we can see situations and experience them and understand that we do always have a choice within the change that's happening, and how businesses, more importantly, can implement that change with a focus on how other humans are going to understand and be a part of that change. So as we do get into, we talk about the navigation of our emotions within all of this, in a personal sense, in a business sense, and how it really is all one thing, and how us as humans, what we need, what our environment is, what's needed in our environment to thrive, essentially, and how we can be more conscious in business and also just in our lives to lead more sustainable lives. I think it's a really important takeaway. And I think these areas between business and our personal lives, they do overlap. There's no doubt about that. But to what extent? And we get into that. We also talk about Vipassana meditation, which I love connecting with people who are already been on a Vipassana meditation and have that as part of their makeup, as part of a tool in their toolkit. So he talks about that quite extensively, which I'm going to put out also in a separate video. So that'll pop up at the end. And this will be on YouTube. If you're watching it on YouTube, hello, good to see you. And yeah, what else do I need to cover? He's got a book called The Mindfulness and the Art of Change by Choice. He's been on a few BBC radio interviews. He's worked with companies, if I hadn't mentioned already, called Ella's Kitchen, and some corporate big companies like Microsoft and Pfizer. And he's got a very, very well laid out website, which you can find all of his details and some of these interviews on there. But yeah, more importantly, I hope you enjoy the conversation and devour it in a way that suits you. So yes, shout out from me. I hope you're doing well and enjoy today's episode. Peace.
We're all fractals of God. If God is the universal energy of which we're all a part of, and we're all fractals of that, and one of our missions in life is to reconnect through the amnesia we have that tells us we're separate.
Welcome to the podcast. Appreciate your time, first of all, and coming on. This is it's going to be a joy. Who knows where the conversation is going to go, but I've got a feeling it's going to hit the spot, I think, and run along the common theme which the podcast has, which roots us back into this kind of core of what makes us human, and which runs along your work nicely. And I think what people are going to get from this conversation is kind of the business side of it and how we can live more consciously throughout all our kind of different selves and different ways in which we present ourselves to the world, whether that's at home with family, whether that's with friends, in the workplace, how it can all be kind of, brought together under a kind of a theme of how we can live more consciously and more connected.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd love to, first of all, let's just paint the picture of you and a bit of your upbringing, growing up, what life was like for you. And then we'll move from there. And obviously I want to talk heavily about Vipassana meditation and how that played such a big part in your journey and how it continues to do so.
Sure. Thank you. Well, I was born Phillip Cox in Birmingham nearly 65 years ago, next week, in fact. And I had a real fascination with people watching from the very early stage. And also, I didn't know the language for it then, but I was quite empathetic. I could feel what other people were feeling when I was a kid. And I didn't quite know how to express that sense of sensitivity, that sense of being fascinated by people and the human condition. And growing up in a very ordinary suburb of Birmingham with a low middle class family, strove in some way to make sense of it all. And I left home when I was 16 and joined a religious cult called the Moonies, or the Unification Church of Korea, which is their full title. And it was really just a part of that quest to understand what it is to be human. I was there 3 months, but I grew up very fast in those 3 months. And then I eventually, through doing various jobs that were a bit dead end, decided to go, what do you really want to do, Phillip? And it was to become an actor. And that was the link to the sensitive side of me and the people watching side. I haven't got a great love of the theatre, no tradition of that in my family, but I suppose to an extent, I was late teens, early 20s, I wanted to be rich and famous. But the main drive was to explore humanity in that. And I did that as a profession, went to drama college for 3 years and became a professional actor doing mainly film and television, and changed my name to Phillip CoxHynd because there was already a Phillip Cox in equity. And then when I got married and had kids when I was about 34, married when I was 22, decided to change my name to Phillip CoxHynd because a slew of people knew me as Phillip Cox, a slew of people knew me as Phillip CoxHynd, and one of my kids going to be called. So I lumbered them with this mouthful of a surname. And then at the age of 30, a big change in my life. A friend of mine told me about a personal development workshop called the 5-day training. It was formerly called exegesis, which is a Greek word, and exegete is one who witnesses the truth. And it was a UK version of a big American workshop called EST, standard for Earhart Seminar Trainings. And in the last 20 odd years, it's been called Landmark Forum. I think 1.5% of Americans have done Landmark Forum, and a huge number, wow, several tens of thousands of people in the UK have done it. In 1986, when I did the UK version, it was 5 days long. It was called the 5-day training. It had kind of separated from Landmark. And on a Friday, a Saturday, a Sunday, following Wednesday evening, following Saturday and Sunday, and the following Wednesday evening. And it did wacky, weird stuff, particularly for the late 80s. We did catharsis. We hit pillows with tennis rackets. We did rebirthing. Talked about our childhood and the influence that had on our behaviors as an adult. We talked on the connection between emotions and our bodies. We did psychodrama to really play out the personalities we've become as separate from the soul or the real essential human being that we were. And I've never done anything like that before. I haven't even been to a counselor, nothing, like zero. So I dived from this fairly sheltered world, although acting had opened my eyes to an extent, into this unknown world, but one that strangely felt incredibly familiar to me. I wanted to suck it up more. And the central tenet of that workshop was, you are or can be responsible for your life. Not just what you do, but what you experience in your life. And it was a few years later that somebody used a great exposition of the word responsible by saying you are able to respond to your life, response ability, as opposed to knee-jerk reaction. So as human beings are naturally reactive. You know, somebody pushes me in the street, I want to push them back or run away. One of those two, it's the flight or fight mechanism. It's the Neanderthal brain that we've still got and keeps us physically safe. But I started to learn on that workshop that the signals I get to keep me physically safe are exactly the same as the signals I get that try to keep me emotionally safe. But if I listen to those signals too much, I avoid all forms of fear rather than discerning between fear that I can work through and fear that I need to take note of if I'm crossing a road and a bus comes around the corner. I need to take care of that one. But if I'm just feeling embarrassed or frightened or angry or lost, do I need to run away from that, or can I work through it? And it was through doing that workshop that I became friends with one of the facilitators over the following 6 months or more. And she said, "You're really interested in this stuff, aren't you?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Why don't you give up acting and join us?" And I went, "But I'm an actor." She said, "Well, when did you work last?" I said, "That's not fair." It'd been a few months. And I didn't do well in acting. I bought my first house from my acting career. But I thought, no, this is a crossroads. This is a crossroads, Philip. This is where my heart lies. So I gave up acting. I joined this organization called Programs Limited. They were quite notorious. I even got myself in Cult Corner for being part of that organization. I only stayed for 3 years. But in that period, within 6 months, they trained me up, and I was leading. I was only one of 3 facilitators ever to lead this huge 5-day workshop to 250 delegates at a time. I did them every 6 weeks. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. And then I started to work with other people in this personal development field that suddenly appeared to me to be a big thing that previously I didn't even know existed. And I ended up working with a guy called John Grinder, who was one of the 2 guys that formulated neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, along with his partner, Richard Bandler. I trained Paul McKenna. He was still at Capital Radio before he left and joined Richard Bandler when Bandler and Grinder split. I worked with some guys from California. I went off to do a lot of naked workshops, exploring relationships and sexuality and the true meaning of intimacy. Into me you see, which is emotional transparency. It's not what we do with our bodies. And I did that for 25 years subsequently with an organization in California called the Human Awareness Institute. So all of these things started to really shape me from the late 80s, early 90s, until I left that programs organization. My wife had trained as a hypnotherapist. We were asked by somebody who had their own fitness company if we'd write a workshop to include all this esoteric understanding, the personal insight stuff about being responsible for your experience, but combine it with conscious interpersonal communication, non-violent communication. And that really hit the spot for me, because I'd started to do a lot of workshops as a facilitator then of people that wanted to understand themselves. But a lot of them left the workshop and couldn't, what I say, cross the road and chew gum at the same time. They couldn't communicate with people who hadn't done a workshop. They hadn't got the kindness, the awareness, the consciousness, the mindfulness, as it's become known, to really listen to other people, to phrase things, to ask questions, to open others up, to interpersonally communicate. And I'd studied a lot of nonviolent communication, as well as NLP, and did workshops, wrote workshops with John Grinder. And so that was a genesis of the last big workshops we did to the public. My wife and I did a 5-day seminar to the public called the Communication Seminar for several years. And it was this blending of personal understanding and interpersonal communication. And it was that really triggered some of the delegates coming to us and saying, this was great for me, but it would be amazing if you could take this kind of thing into my company. Would you consider taking it into business? Well, here was this ex-actor that kind of fallen into workshop facilitation. I didn't own a suit. I didn't know anything about business. But one of the delegates had set me up to meet with the CEO of a then big computer company called Apricot. In the late 80s, early 90s, there was a slew of fruit IT companies. There was an apricot, there was a pear, there was an apple. Don't know what happened to that, but anyway, Apricot was a Birmingham-based computer company that was bought by Mitsubishi Electric as a foothold in Europe. And this delegate had worked for Apricot. They said they're just about to go through a massive culture change program being bought by this Japanese multinational. And I've got you a meeting with the CEO. Oh, great. I thought, what the hell do I do? So I went to see him, and I just did my best and thought, come on, Philip, listen. Listen to him, draw him out, find out what the essence. Don't be bamboozled by management speak. They're humans. They're humans doing work. One of the phrases I picked up in those early years was, at its absolute best, work is love in action. Work is love in action. If love is a state of being, a state of balance, a state of harmony with all the essence of who we are and harmony with those around us, we are able to let ourselves give up to that love, give up to that state, to fall in that state. It's interesting, when we meet a partner, we often talk about falling in love. We often talk about falling in love with that person, but actually, what about if we're falling in the state of love in parallel to that person falling in the state of love? It's not I'm falling with them, because then I become attached to them. It's me in my own state of falling that enables the falling to be pure. Of course, often what happens in relationships, we then start to project that love onto them, and we want the echo. I love you. I love you too. And then we start to become conditional. So if love is work in action, I thought, just come on, listen to this CEO and find out what he wants. And we ended up being there, giving what I then branded the communication stuff I've been doing as leadership development, as workshops for the management team, as doing interviews with members of staff and finding out what the culture was and what it needed to be. And I was there for 18 months. And then they referred me to Microsoft. We did a program with them for 18 months. One CEO knew the other, as often the case. And then we got referred to Barclays Bank. And then a big turning point was referral in the mid-90s to Pfizer, the pharmaceutical giant. I've been doing some work as a consultant then, still on personal development, but wrapped up as leadership development or culture change. I'd kind of borrowed the language rather than trying to stay pure to this wolf. I wrapped it up in the sheep's clothing of management speak, because it was appropriate. It worked. You know, I couldn't go into business in those days and talk about emotions, talk about energy, even though it's the same stuff. So I'd wrap it up, and it was fine. And I wanted to find out what this company really wanted. This was a consultancy called CSC Index, the Computer Science Corporation of America. So we did some work with them on the management team, and they got the big contract with Pfizer. They were being paid $250,000 a month. And the contract was get our drugs to market more quickly. In those days, way before the pandemic, as we've often heard in the last year, in normal times, it can take 6, 7, 8, 9 years to get a chemical or a molecule that you've registered as being useful. And for that, you get a 20-year patent. It can take you 10 of those years to get it to market, because of trials can take so long. Most of it's bureaucracy. We've just got through vaccines being come to market so quickly because most companies have cut out the bureaucracy. They haven't short-circuited the trials. And so this company, CSC Index, was a business process re-engineering company. They looked at the mechanisms of process, simply a series of actions that connect to deliver an outcome. That's what I define a process as being. But their style was to go into a company, take the best minds off-site in a hotel for 3 months, get them to blue sky think about the best processes in the world, wine and dine them, jack them all up because they felt like they were gods, then wheel them back into the company 3 months later with these amazing processes, and they all go, isn't this great? And all their colleagues had been left doing the work, turned around and said, get lost. We don't want your shiny new process. We weren't involved with it. Or words to that effect. That's the clean version. So they nearly got fired for forcing this kind of process change on a very high profile drug with Pfizer. So Pfizer said, we'll give you one more chance, and we'll give you a less important drug that we don't think will do much, but if you can improve that time to market, we may roll it out to other drugs. So the boss of CSC Index, who I've been doing work with, called me and said, look, you're the culture guy. Can you and perhaps a colleague from your company work with the process guys and help bring about a culture change so that they can absorb the process? And I went, yes. So long story short, I got involved. I was made the chief consultant. I had 5 consultants working with me, and the drug development team they gave us, which I didn't think would do very much, turned out to be Viagra. And we managed to get it to market 9 months ahead of schedule. And I think, Chris, that was one of the turning points in me really understanding. I had to come up to speed very quickly in that project. I was there for 2.5 years. I really had to understand what process meant, what systems meant, what structure, management and otherwise meant, what a 3-year strategy document looked like, what vision, goals, purpose, values, all of that stuff in terms of behaviors, what culture change meant in a visceral way. Because the separation, which is often the case with a lot of HR-oriented consultants or business coaches, is that they separate the people stuff, the attitudes, the behaviors, the beliefs, the values into the HR bucket, and then leave the business stuff, the process, system, strategy, structure, to another kind of consultant. And I thought, this is nuts. You and I right now are being human. We're talking and you're listening and we're connecting, and I feel a real connection to you. So that's the software. That's the human software. That's the soft stuff, the fluffy HR-y stuff. But we're doing it through the chair I'm sitting on, the desk that's supporting my iMac, the wonder of the internet, the Zoom. That's the hardware. And so life is a perfect reflection on this physical plane of where the software, using that analogy, and the hardware meet. If I was pure heart, pure soul, pure energy, I wouldn't need to eat. I wouldn't need to go to the toilet. I wouldn't need to sleep. And yet we obviously know that we are on this plane in a physical body. And therefore, what I've loved about my career, fast forwarding, and I continue to do those kind of culture change projects after Pfizer, so a whole slew of corporates, and then since 2008, predominantly with SMEs, past the crash. What I've loved, and particularly in the last 10 years or more, the whole consciousness of the world, and the business world including, is starting to go full circle. And all of the stuff that I learned in those heady days of the early personal development movement, late 80s, early 90s, of crying and expressing emotion and being real and owning my reactions and being able to respond, responsibility on a personal level, interpersonal communication, all of that stuff I learned, which I then had to wrap in sheep's clothing to make it palatable to the business community, that's come full circle now. In the last 10 years, I can do rebirthing with management teams. I can help guide them through some mild child regression stuff to understand where their personality and therefore leadership style has come from. What led them to be a more controlling personality? What led them to be more of an approval-seeking or people-pleasing personality? And what aspects of those childhood, adolescent defense mechanisms, if you like, which we all acquire, what aspects of those really serve us now? And how could we have the courage to feel the fears that those habit patterns mask and take the gloves off and be more vulnerable, more open, more real? But as we know in this mental health awareness period, vulnerability is strength. It's not something to be frightened of.
Do you know what? After listening to you, there's a quote that really stands out for me. It's from a yoga teacher / trauma therapist called Sean Corn. And she said this one quote, which is very simple, and it echoes what I'm listening to and what I'm seeing. Ignore the story, see the soul, remember to love. And it feels to me, after listening to your progression through this, let's say, business world, you've got this soft, kind, curious actor who's open to new opportunities, but hasn't been necessarily conditioned in the world of this business, coming into it with new eyes, with a new way of seeing the kind of the systems, the structure. And a question I want to ask is, did at any point things change you, or you start to notice change within yourself? Because our environment shapes us big time. And to a point, you're coming in with the questions, with the observations, and you're just being truthful of what you're seeing in these places, hoping to implement change and your way of seeing and your perspective. But at any point, did it come to change you? You know, because I think the hardest thing for people is to just ignore the story and see the soul behind the voice, or the words in which are coming out, or the way in which they're talking perhaps about other people, and just seeing what they really, seeing past that, what are they really trying to do here.
Absolutely. I think the simple answer to your question is it's changed me all the time, at every step of the way. Every part of the journey I've just described has changed me. I'm a dyslexic. I left school at 15 with 1 O level. And when I made the transition from, not so much from acting to facilitation, that felt like a more organic, didn't need to prove myself intellectually transition. But when I moved from facilitating to the public to facilitating, consulting and coaching to business, I became much more aware of the fact that I didn't have a degree. I didn't have an MBA. I didn't initially, how to read a spreadsheet. I didn't know what a 3-year strategy document was. And I think my naivety became a real strength, because I could see the importance of those things. Those were labels that described aspects of how business and how stuff got done, but I didn't get hung up on it. And I think when I was working at my best, it was to take that naivety, to take that open-heartedness, to take that fear, which I had all the time, and I've still got at times, of not being enough, of not getting it right, and then one thing I learned with working with John Grinder and all the NLP stuff I've done, one of the favorite phrases John taught me was, the best way to hold somebody's attention is to give them yours. And really learning to put my focus when I'm scared, when I'm nervous, when I don't know, when the voice in my head is going nuts, all of that, thank my mind for sharing, because it's doing its best, and put my attention onto the other person. What are they doing? What are they saying? What turns of phrase can I subtly question and find out a bit more about their internal world? What's going on for them? How can I dive down into their world with them, such I can understand what their view of the world is like, and then perhaps I might be able to support them in some way. And every time I did that, the answers of what to do became clear to me. It's like they presented themselves to me. And my lack of MBA, my lack of academic prowess, all of that became irrelevant. And then I started eventually to realize that actually they had hired me because of my more objective perceptions. I can remember I developed a one-to-one coaching day. It's an 8-hour slot with an individual, C-suite individual, often off-site, to really deep dive and explore their own psyche, their personality, their childhood, and what made them the leader that they are. And I was doing one of these days, probably in my late 30s, with a guy who was in his 60s, probably my age now, and he was knighted. Sir Christopher so-and-so, head of a big multinational corporation. We did the coaching day in his Grace and Favour flat in Mayfair. He wanted to show me his Jaguar collection in the lunch break, and it wasn't dinky toys. It was 6 classic Jags with the green baize covers on them in the basement car park of this Mayfair apartment block. So I'm saying all this because by all criteria in most societies, this guy was successful. And we've done this deep dive into his childhood and his background, and what was it about him that meant that some of the MDs of the separate companies he was chairman of didn't always listen to him. That's what the brief was, how to get more traction in the organization he was running. And at one point, we were looking at childhood experiences and fears and the way he dealt with fears and dealt with self-worth and all of that stuff. And so it just came out my mouth once, and I said, so, Chris, what's your biggest fear? What's your biggest fear? And he smiled and he reflectively looked at the carpet, never forget that. And he said, oh, that's easy. He said, my biggest fear is that one day I'll get found out. And I kind of knew what he meant, because I feel that. But I pushed it a bit further and I said, found out for what? And he said, found out that this kid in short trousers got this far. And I must have done probably close to 1,000 or more one-to-one days now, and had thousands of people go through workshops I've run both to the public and in corporate settings. And whenever I've done that kind of deep dive work with individuals, that disparity between how we appear on the surface to other people, mainly we've got our shit together and we're okay, how that contrasts with the swan analogy of all graceful on the surface and pedaling like hell underneath. And a few years ago, somebody gave me a birthday card with a quote on the front, and it's framed, it's on my office wall. I just want to read it out. It's by Margaret Atwood, the novelist. And it says, I believe that everyone else my age is an adult, whereas I am merely in disguise. And so I think, going back to your initial question, what enabled me to work in business was to find ways to listen, and through listening gain trust, and through gaining trust, slowly be able to open the door with individuals and with leadership teams, with boards, with managers, open the door to them realizing that it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to be at work and not all of us always have the answers. It's actually not just okay, it's what builds a role model of you as a leader such that it enables those you're leading to feel comfortable, to open up. Not just to be vulnerable and make mistakes, but to have ideas and share them in the knowledge that they're not going to get shouted down because my boss on this pedestal knows all the answers. If they know they don't know all the answers, if they understand that we're all playing roles in life, that our humanity is a leveler. I don't care whether you're making widgets, drugs, services, making food, doesn't matter what you're doing. If you're doing it with humanity and a commitment to do something really, really well, and increasingly the millennial generation, probably because they've been grown up with my generation pampering them more than my generation was, and I think that's potentially a good thing, because then what they're now, the millennials are saying is, I don't want to work for the man if the man ain't got his heart. I don't want to work for a company if it's ruthless. I don't work for a company that is just about profit. And in truth, companies that have been successful, really successful, have rarely just been about profit. Most people go to work to do a good job, to feel satisfied. And that's where at its best, work is love in action comes from. It's that ability to contribute. We're pack animals, us human beings. One of the reasons that we've become so successful and in danger of becoming victims of our own success in terms of the damage we're doing to the rock we inhabit is because we know how to collaborate. And yet we're frightened of doing that and exposing ourselves, because we also live, as Alan Watts once said, we live in skin-encapsulated egos. I'll never know what it's like to be you, Chris. We may share all kinds of common experiences that we've had, and we may feel close because of that, but I'll never be you. I'll never know what it feels like to be you. And there's one of the human dilemmas. On the one hand, we're striving to connect, to feel loved, to make a difference, which predominantly we endeavor to do with other people. And yet on the other side of it, we are completely alone.
Yeah, it's so powerful. It's so powerful. I can feel myself just softening and opening up as I hear you speak, because maybe it's the tone in which you're speaking that's so subtle and impactful. But what you're talking about essentially is that sustainability of a business, that authoritarian techniques is just so unsustainable, because without showing that vulnerability or that not always being right, and opening up, you're then inviting other people to relate to you, right?
Absolutely. I mean, the project I'm working on at the moment, if people are interested, you can go to the website. It's called techniquesforliving.com. One word, Techniques for Living. And although I've got my corporate company going still, Harley Young, harley-young.co.uk. If you go to that, you'll see the corporate work I've done, but you also get a sense of this humanity behind it. The techniquesforliving.com idea is that we're going to be filming a series of courses that people can buy that, as I mentioned earlier, has kind of completed the circle. There are a range of techniques that enable us to live, with an exclamation mark, as humans, be it personal or work. The demarcation between work life and personal life is becoming so blurred now. Not with every company, but we're on a trajectory that ain't going to change. And I think the pandemic has also accelerated that. I've worked with a lot of companies in the last year whereby I've done board meetings in a t-shirt like I am now. If I'd have turned up, I'd have always worn a business shirt, collar and done, maybe smart jeans. 20 years ago, it would have been a suit and a tie. Now it's just clothes. But clothes are an expression. I'm more relaxed in the t-shirt than I am in the suit. And that translates into behaviors. Doing Zoom calls has become the norm now. The amount of companies, big and small, that are talking about this new phrase, which will enter our lexicon, be in the Oxford English Dictionary next year, hybrid working. We'll never go back, for most office-bound jobs, to working 5 days a week. My kids will say, what, your granddad used to go to work in a car 5 days a week and drive an hour or so either way and stick, what? Didn't they have the internet then? Well, yeah. Didn't they have video? No. Yeah, they did actually. Oh, so what stopped them? Habit, fear of trusting people. No, I think we're now into a different paradigm of establishing routines, boundaries, ensuring that if we're working at home, we take breaks, we hydrate, we walk. I don't have push email on my phone. Never have it on. There's my kids. Just the screen share came on. Because I want to choose when I respond to email. If you want to get hold of me quicker than every 3 or 4 hours, I check email first thing in the morning, around 9:30 as well, then lunchtime, and then about 4 o'clock. And I may check it at 6, and then I don't. If you want me any sooner than that, WhatsApp me, call me, text me, or pick up the phone. Old school, but it works. So there are a range of things that we still need to learn in terms of habits to become into the new muscle memory that will enable us to have some breaks between engaging our brain in a focused way, which we might call work, and disengaging our brain in a focused way, which we may call rest. But I think the old definition of work life and non-work life will become less delineated in that binary way.
Yeah, I think I'm going to be honest and say I do fear that change, and that's just an instinct. This is my natural reaction to double take the unfamiliar, let's say.
So let me do an quick exercise with you on that, because in a way this goes to the heart of Vipassana, which I know we want to talk about at some point.
Yeah, for sure.
Just clasp your hands together. And if you're listening and not watching us, I've just clasped my hands together.
Not if you're driving, but
yeah, if you're driving, don't do this. Wait until you've stopped. We didn't have to think how to do that. We'll know how to clasp our hands. And if you look down, most of you will have one thumb over the other. So my left thumb is over my right thumb. Some people have thumbs side by side. That's fine too. So what have you got, Chris? Have you got a thumb over another thumb?
Same as you.
Left over left. Okay. Are you left or right-handed?
I'm right-handed.
Okay. So if we're looking for reasons to why we did it one way than the other, you could assume it might be to do with left or right-handedness or left or right brain dominance. But I've got my left thumb over my right thumb as well as you, Chris, but I'm left-handed. So that isn't a reason. And if you do this as a group of people, you'll see it played out.
Okay.
So now take your hands apart and intertwine your fingers and thumbs the other way around.
You do this in yoga.
If you've done it a lot, it may feel as comfortable, but
yeah,
does it feel as comfortable to you now?
Never. It never does. No, it's important to, we're asymmetrical, but it's important to feed the other side.
So just stay with the hands like that in the opposite direction for a while I explain the reasoning behind it. This has been explored by behavioral psychologists.
Yeah.
Amazing what they get paid to explore. But this is one of them. And they call this, and folding our arms, crossing our legs over our knees, etc. They call them resting behaviors. It's what we do with our limbs when we're just using our brains. And after much research, particularly watching kids, and they'll do other things. I remember holding my hands under my armpits.
Yeah, I used to sit on my hands when I was eating.
Yeah. And I remember I got bullied in the playground. I didn't do that one anymore. But kids were observed, and we've now concluded that this is purely habit. Kids at the initial stage, when they're exploring their hands, they're exploring which way they cross their fingers, exploring which way they cross their arms, will do it both ways for weeks, even months. But eventually they'll start to do it slightly more than the other way. And the more they do it that way, the more they do it that way. And so what they concluded is that in response to anything we do or experience through any of the 5 sense doors, including the 6th sense door, which I'll talk about in a moment, which is our thoughts, but the 5 senses we all know about: sight, hearing, smell, taste, touch. When we do something repeatedly, it creates a message in the brain between the neurons. We get what's called a neural connection. Mm-hmm. So the neural connection to the word Chris is so ingrained that even if you change your name to Richard and somebody shouted Chris in a car park 20 years time and you'd been known for Richard for 20 years, you turn your head to Chris, as well as you're turning your head to Richard, because that would have been an ingrained new neural pathway which would be as accepted to your brain as the other one. But to start with, the reason that, so what is in a physical, what is the discomfort in you sitting with your hands this way? Well, in very simple terms, whenever you experience anything, in this case, it's touch, it's feel, we're crossing our fingers in a different way. It could be seeing something, hearing something, smelling something that we don't recognize. The brain, in that survival part of it, wanting to make us safe, shoots a bit of adrenaline around the system, as if to say, oh, get ready for something. We might have to change, come out of this because it doesn't feel good. And the feeling good is the adrenaline causes your heart rate to go up very slightly, your breathing to go up very slightly. The musculature in your muscle system will increase tension very slightly, and your sweat response will also change. All of that will happen just as you cross your fingers differently. Now, the point of discernment, which is what happens in Vipassana practice, is to recognize neural discomfort through the adrenaline rush that is of no importance. It's a signal for fight or flight that, through discerning the difference between what's real fear and what's FEAR, false evidence, appearing real. The physical sensation of you experiencing discomfort with your fingers being intertwined the way they're intertwined now is real. You are feeling it in your body. That is real. However, you can either react to it and take your fingers apart, and I've had people in workshops saying, this isn't right, this isn't good, this isn't me. That's interesting. And of course, unless we can notice the reaction and then move out of that knee-jerk black or white, this isn't me, into responsibility. Am I able to respond to the fact that I feel uncomfortable when I cross my fingers? Yeah, I've got an intellectual brain, an emotional brain that can discern between discomfort that is something to really change my behavior around because it's physically harming me, and something perhaps I need to feel, to experience, such that it is another option. Now, I've been waffling on for a while you're still sitting with your fingers crossed the wrong way. Does it feel any less uncomfortable?
No.
No. So there's a good indication as to how long it takes. It takes between 10 and 60 minutes doing something as innocuous as that every day for 28 to 30 days before the neurons in the brain start to accept that this isn't a threat. Got nothing to do with the cognitive brain, nothing to do with thoughts. It's purely to do with the neurons not sending adrenaline out anymore because you're doing it. And it's fascinating how, you can take your hands apart if you want to, fascinating how in the pandemic, there was this whole resistance in the beginning to wearing masks, to social distancing, all this. Oh, I don't want to do that. It feels weird. It feels weird. Back to the physiology. And yet now, depending on your stance, whether you've been vaccinated or not, and what you believe and all of that, that's personal choice as well. There's a massive resistance amongst a lot of people to change the habits they've now acquired and go back to old habits for fear of what? Well, it just doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
So, shall I explore and connect that to Vipassana?
Yeah, you can.
Got a good chance to do that.
Yeah.
So, for those who don't know, Vipassana is a very simple but powerful and very old form of meditation that was, if we believe the records as far as they exist, and they exist back to 200 or 300 years after the Buddha existed, is a mind discipline meditation that the Buddha stumbled upon. And it's from a Pali word, one of the two ancient Indian languages, Sanskrit and Pali. And Pali was the language Gautama, who became the Buddha, would have spoken. And Vipassana means to see things as they truly are. Simple as that. And it's been taught monk to monk in its purest form for 2,500 years since the Buddha was here. But in its pure form, in its unchanged form, it only really survived in Buddhist monasteries in Burma, now Myanmar. As with a lot of philosophical ideas or spiritual ideas, you look at Christianity, look at Islam, look at Buddhism. A lot of it was not written down at the time. When it was written down, often afterwards, it became corrupted, it became changed, it became ismed, it became a religion. And so, as with Buddhism, you get a lot of chanting, you get a lot of different kinds of Buddhism around the world. It moved down through India, through Sri Lanka, and off into the Far East, China, Japan, Burma. But in Burma was the only place that this pure form of the meditation, the core practice of what became Buddhism, really survived. And it was taught to a layperson for the first time in the 1840s. And that layperson taught another layperson. It was only 3 generations of lay people that ended up with a teacher in the Burmese government after the Brits handed it over in the 1950s. And he became the accountant general, the equivalent of our chancellor. And a Indian Hindu, born in Burma, a very successful businessman called S.N. Gunka, felt a nationalistic urge to help the new emerging Buddhist government. And so he gave up his business, very wealthy, he could do so, joined the Chancellor's office and became an accountant within the Burmese government. But he had really bad migraines, Gunka, and he heard that his boss, the Chancellor, the Accountant General, was a Vipassana teacher. And he'd heard that Vipassana, this meditation, could help cure migraines. So Gunka went to his boss and said, "Would you teach me Vipassana to cure my migraines?" And his boss said, "No, far too important just to teach you to get rid of a headache." Gunka went, "Well, hang on a minute, where's your compassion?" And he said, "No, if you want to do it because you want to do it, but don't do it to get rid of a headache." Anyway, he badgered, and eventually his boss did teach him Vipassana. And Gunka was so blown away with the power of this meditation that he studied, and eventually became a teacher. And he went back to India to teach it to his family, and it took off. So that's the 50s and the 60s, and then in the 70s he started bringing it to the West, and it's now taught all over the world. There's a centre near Hereford where it's taught in its purest form. It's never really changed. And Gunka died about 6-7 years ago. And when you go to be taught how to do Vipassana, the course is taught through MP3 recordings of one of the last courses that Gunka taught. And it's taught in 10-day silent retreats. And when a friend of mine who'd done it in the 90s told me about that, I thought, the idea of meditating sounded great. But did you say 10 days? And did you say, I thought you said silent, as in you don't talk and you meditate, but you chat and no, you don't talk at all. What? Oh, and you don't make eye contact. Oh, and you lock your phone up and you can't take a laptop. Oh, and you can't take any books or notebooks or pen. I said, you're bonkers. I'm not doing that. So being the arrogant son of a what's it I can be sometimes. But I couldn't throw the leaflet away. She gave me this leaflet on Vipassana. And something about it that I just thought, I want to do this, but it sounds crazy. So I stuck it in my filing tray. And every year I clear out my filing tray and stick the stuff I didn't want anymore in the bin, and the stuff I wanted to keep, I'd file it away. But I didn't want to file this. So I stuck it back in my filing tray. And then in 2003, I was going through the tail end of a very emotionally challenging 5-year divorce process, which was painful and protracted. And I really wanted to ground. I wanted to land. I wanted to find out who I was at that stage of my life. So I dug up this leaflet and I thought, come on, Philip, it's not the end of the world. You can carve out 10 days. You can always leave. It's donation based, as in the Buddhist tradition, so you're not going to lose any money if you leave. Give it a go. So I did. And it was life-changing. The 3 things in my life that has turned it around and continues to turn it around was this initial work I did with the 5-day training and programs, then all the work I did for 25 years with the Human Awareness Institute, both in California and in the workshops they did, which I brought to the UK in 96, Love, Intimacy and Sexuality were the workshops, and they ran here until 2016. And then latterly this work on Vipassana, it kind of completed the circle for me. And Vipassana at its core is the most simplest technique, but as with the hand clasping exercise, the reason you sit cross-legged for 10 hours with lots of breaks and walking in the woods and lots of time to stretch for 10 days is that's the time it takes at least for the mind to start losing its grip, for it start to shut that up. It is so powerful, that chatterbox. Can I sit still even for an hour? And what it teaches is if you really get into cramp or you really get discomfort, they say, well, move. It's not like a torture chamber. But the idea is, can I sit still and notice that itch and not scratch it? And start with, I couldn't have to scratch it. But eventually I started to notice that if I really focused on the sensations and the itch, and they really encourage you to really focus on the micro sensations, eventually they disappear. The itch, it disappears. And the core of Vipassana is to focus on the breath as it comes in and out of the nose. You spend 3 days just focusing on breath, noticing your thoughts, bringing attention back to the breath, going off with the fairies, going off with all kinds of crazy, bring it back to the breath. And then after 3 days, you start to focus on your skin, top to bottom, sensations. And the reason they focus on breath, and the reason they focus about sensations, you could have focused on your heartbeat, but not everyone can feel their pulse rate just by sitting, is the ancients, Buddha, the monks, all realized that your breath is forever changing. The sensations on your skin is forever changing. In one of the suttas, the writings of the Buddha talks about focusing so much in the meditation that he can feel tickling sensations throughout every part of his being, constantly moving. He's describing atoms move in our modern scientific understanding. And so his big aha, if you like, is, my God, nothing's static. And if it's nothing static, everything is changing. So the mind's desire to hang on to the present through holding on to the past or pre-imagining what the future is, craving the good times of the past, not wanting to be attached to the discomfort of anything and everything, including sitting with your fingers crossed, and catastrophizing the future in case it's bad. All of that is purely in our heads. And if we focus down to our bodies, second by second, moment by moment, I'm okay in this moment, I'm okay in this moment, I'm okay in this moment, I'm feeling pain in this moment. Am I all right with that pain? Yeah, because eventually, guess what? That pain's going to go. But also using the laws of dynamic, we see it in the physical universe, Newtonian laws of physics. One of the greatest, the three laws of Newton's physics. You cannot destroy energy, you can only transform it from one state to another. So if I have a piece of paper, the amount of latent energy in that piece of paper is completely equal to the amount of energy that's released when I set fire to it. The smoke, the heat, the light, it's all the same, just transformed. And also the second law, Newton, what you resist persists with equal and opposite force. So if I'm feeling angry, if I'm feeling frightened, if I'm feeling scared, if I'm feeling upset, and I don't express it, I don't let the tears come, I don't let the rant happen in an appropriate way, I don't just feel it. The amount of energy I have to falsely pile into my system to hold that energy down is equal and opposite to the emotion I'm feeling. And of course, we all know what happens when we hold the energy down. We feel ill, we get headaches, we feel sick. We take it out on someone else, we kick the cat, we cut somebody else up on the motorway. And Vipassana talks a lot about this sixth sense door I mentioned earlier. We have between 20 and 50,000 thoughts a day. Now, what's the relevance of that? Well, if you just sit still for a moment, again, don't do this if you're driving. But sit still, close your eyes, take a breath. And as you breathe out, just bring to mind a scary experience, something that recently has frightened you. Could be a small thing, could be a big thing. And as you think about it now, just notice if anything physically is changing to you now. Is your heart rate changed slightly? Has your breathing changed ever so slightly? Any tension anywhere? Most people will experience a subtle change. And that's just the thought of something that did happen, not is happening now, but it feels in a smaller way as though it is happening now. So that shows us the visceral link, not just between the senses and our physicality. We kind of get that. If I hear a siren, my heart rate goes up. If I smell burning, my heart rate goes. If I taste beautiful food, my physicality changes. We see something gorgeous, we see something horrible, our physicality changes. But what we've lost consciousness of is every time we think of something, every time we have a thought, our physicality changes. And I did a more advanced Vipassana year before lockdown, which is an 8-day version. It's pretty much the same, but you study the sutta, the scripture that describes Vipassana. It's only 40 pages. The actual booklet is 80 pages because 40 of it is in Pali and 40 of it's in English. I don't read the Pali bit. But what's fascinating is that Buddha talks about, in the English bit, the mind-body phenomena. And it's always written as mind-body phenomena. And we've, explored in Vipassana. I've done probably 9 10-day workshops, courses now. And I meditate every day, and I'm constantly practicing. It's the same as going to the gym. You don't just go on a 10-day boot camp and say I'm fit now and never go to the gym again. It's, you get a discipline. I used to meditate 20 minutes a day. They recommend an hour, but most people don't. 20 minutes is a great starting point, and then you build it up if you want to. And I build it up to an hour most days now. But this mind-body phenomena fascinated me. And when I saw it written down, you can book a session, a question with the teacher. We've got 2 physical teachers there, as well as this guy recorded, either lunchtime or in the evening. And I went to see the teacher. I said, that just fascinating, the sutta here. It's got mind-body phenomena written with this hyphen as a translation from the Pali. But in the Pali, there isn't a hyphen anywhere. And he smiled and he said, oh, that's because in Pali, there is a word for mind-body. It's not 2 words. It's 1. And I thought, wow, there is no divisibility between thoughts and the effect on our physicality. Every time we think, the quality of our thoughts changes our physical response. If I'm going nuts to having my hands clasped in a different way, if that feels uncomfortable, every time I have a negative thought, if I can't own the physical response, I'm going to try and run away from it. So at its heart, Vipassana certainly isn't a religion. What I love about the Vipassana Center all over the world, and the one's no different to that in Hereford, is there's no Buddhas, there's no suttas. There's a gong to call you to meditations and call you to meals. But it's not Buddhism. It's the technique. It's the meditation technique that's key. And it's purely it's like a mind discipline for the emotions and the soul, in the same way as the gym is a discipline for the body. That's how I describe it.
And I think what Goenka did so well was decentralize the teachings. He took it obviously out to the world because he could. Technology was rife, and he got the funding. And at the start of it, people thought he was mad by not charging any money for this. They will respect you. They'll take advantage of you. And he's like, trust me. And he took it to the West and many parts of the world, set up these centers. And what would happen in history is it would go from teacher to teacher, place to place. But as with humans being the way we are, it would change, and people would put their own take on it, or it would get lost in translation. And now what's happening with technology is hopefully this purest form of the Buddhist teaching at its simplest level is seeing life as it is. Goenka can teach and continue to teach, and if a center takes it off in a direction, you've got all the rest. And it's a really fascinating way of looking at that. But I think there's a big quote that come out. I think it's by Blaise Pascal or something. It says all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit in a room alone with himself.
Yes.
And I think that is powerful, isn't it? Because
it is. And every time I go, it's never easy. It's not about being easy. It's not about nirvana, such as it is, that higher state of enlightenment, that higher state of peace, whilst we're still in this physical plane, isn't about feeling blissful per se. It's about feeling blissful or content or satisfied with whatever I'm feeling.
Yeah.
It's about feeling pain, and if it's mild pain, if it's discomfort, and realizing actually, rather than running away from it, I can feel pain and know that at some point it'll go.
Yeah.
Because most people have heard of the word dharma, but I didn't know what dharma meant. And it means the law of nature, the universal law of nature. And when you look around the planet, everything's in harmony. The leaves don't argue with autumn. Don't go, oh my God, I'm going to lose my leaves. You bastard. Why? Why are you getting cold? Why am I losing my leaves? The vegetation being eaten up by the spewing volcano doesn't hang its head. No, everything just works. It just flows. It all interacts. And because we've developed this thing called reflective consciousness, we can see what's happening, but also the danger is that we lose connection from our bodies and act as though we don't live in that connected world. We don't live in that mind-body phenomena. We don't live in that world whereby our bodies are the arbiters of what's real, but we can discern whether we listen to our bodies or not. Instinct, intuition, all of that stuff is felt in our bodies, but it's in my experience, it's a kind of fluttering in my tummy that is to do with energy rising or energy falling. If I'm stuck as to what decision to make, go to my gut. What's happening to my energy? My emotions, my surface emotions can be going AWOL. I can be frightened, I can be scared, I can be angry, I can be all of those things. And underneath that, what's my energy doing? My energy is saying, yes, go for it. It's time to push through, work through, to feel and go through those surface emotions, because they will dissipate. They're just trying to protect me. But if I'm feeling really good about something, if I'm momentarily, emotionally excited by it, but underlying my energy is going, oh, doesn't feel right, then don't do it. And it's a tuning. For me, Vipassana meditation has become the tuning fork of my heart or soul, if you like, those higher parts of my mind, and connecting back to what's real and what isn't.
Yeah, absolutely. And we just fundamentally don't get taught this. It's an art of living. It's like a blueprint for life, isn't it?
It is.
That's in this reflective consciousness, as you call it. It's like we have that ability to be introspective, to reflect, to make decisions, conscious decisions.
Yeah.
And we don't get taught in school, in education, about how can we live a purposeful life? How can we not react to things? How can we cultivate happiness, joy, compassion? And all these things come down to something we just don't learn. And there are child courses of Vipassana. And
there are, but my kids, before I found Vipassana, I dabbled with the Quakers for a while. I like the idea of their quiet contemplation and going to a Sunday service where you sit in a circle and there's no vicar or priest or minister, and you sit in silence until someone is moved to stand up and say something of value that they've experienced in the previous week. I thought, blimey, how does that work? but it worked really well. I was astounded of how beautiful it was. And sometimes you go for an hour and nobody'd stand up. Mm-hmm. But that silence was as valuable as anything else. And so when my kids were coming to leave prep school, we looked at a Quaker school, and we sent them to a Quaker school called Leighton Park in Reading, and they had silent assemblies. I thought, wow, how amazing. And when they were 12 and 14, they're 2 years apart, I took them to Dharma Dipper, which is the Vipassana Centre near Hereford, to do a 3-day children's course with them. And I was amazed to see these kids from the age of 11 to 16 or so do, I think it was 8 half-hour meditations in the meditation hall throughout the day, and interspersed with games and other things. And I sat at the back of the hall in wonderment that kids could, adults have the, kids can't sit still. Well, if we keep saying kids can't sit still, and when was the last time you saw a parent sit still? Now, kids learn from their adults. When's the last time there was stillness, there was quietness at home, especially with kids? Kids will respond. Kids will respond to what they're being taught. And my daughter now is 30, and she did an adult Vipassana course a couple of years ago, and I think she'll do more. And a friend of mine has got small kids now at a state primary school. They have silence assemblies. And it's interesting how this whole notion of mindfulness has now come up. It comes from Vipassana. And I was teaching that stillness, that reflectivity, which was part of the program's limited work I did back with the 5-day training, long before it was labeled mindfulness, and long before I did Vipassana and realized where mindfulness had come from. But if you think about that word being mindful, to be aware, to be conscious, and it's not just conscious of what we do on the outside, how we communicate, how we listen, but how we navigate through our life, the day-to-day of, am I conscious of sitting down with a bowl of food and taking a moment, literally a moment, to think about where it came from, and then just be conscious about the spoon going in and it going into my mouth and chewing the food. It doesn't have to be a big deal, but just slow it down a bit so that I'm consciously eating. I tend not to get indigestion if I do that as well. Be conscious, mindful. A lot of the leadership workshops I do on leadership, most of them have mindfulness in the title: mindful leadership, mindful resilience, and mindful time management. Often we don't mindfully take time to transition in our lives. Well, one of the simple things I do when I'm doing a culture change project in a company is to look at their version of iCal, or their electronic diary system. Most diary systems only allow you to put in a meeting on the hour. That's nuts. What do? Teleport yourself from one meeting to the next? No, we rush. We rush, and we often get to the next meeting late. So one of the things I did with the Vigra project at Pfizer, particularly because it was a big campus spread out, people will only get to meetings 20 minutes late because they took time to get from the last meeting to this one, and half of them would start to leave 20 minutes early to try and get to the next one. So only 20 minutes of the hour was useful. So we changed the electronic. That was a great example of hardware, electronic software, but I'm talking about structure affecting human software. So we got the calendar system changed. So the first meeting of the day that you could book was 8 o'clock. The second one was 9:15. The third one was 10:30. The third one was 11:45, whatever. So there was a built-in 50-minute gap. And sometimes using the hardware around us, the technology, particularly nowadays, to help change our behaviors can be great. So, people say to me, well, how do you start meditating? And I say, well, Do you have an iPhone or a smartphone? Well, yeah, I got one of those. What's that to do with meditation? Well, set an alarm. I set several alarms on my phone to go for a break, go for a walk. I work from home predominantly. And you can set up mechanism, turn push off after 7 o'clock at night, set an alarm to go to sleep, maybe at 9, where you turn your screens off, and then, you go to bed whenever you go to bed. But we can use habit pattern forming helpers to start. You don't have to, it's not, I remember doing Vipassana for the first time and thinking, wow, I'm going to get the secrets of the universe. It's a bit like the Hitchhiker's Guide. This guy Gonka is going to reveal to me that the core of God and spirituality is 47 or 42, whatever it was. But when it was revealed to me that actually sit still for an hour a day, notice your thoughts and be centered in your body, that's it. Oh, and, lead a moral life, lead a good life. I felt a bit cheated. I thought, where's the incense and the bowing and the scraping and the chanting and where's all that stuff? And one of the things I love about Gonka and Vipassana is that, having been in a couple of culty organizations and seen a lot of religions become all about the paraphernalia around the core teachings, often in a way that smother the core teachings. I love the fact that Gonka, saw him in an interview the year before he died, being interviewed in India, where they're very reverent of teachers, and they called him Gonka Ji. Ji just means teacher. And the interviewer said, well, you'll get this great guru, you're this great teacher, you formed this whole organization. He said, no. He said, what is wrong with my name? My name is Gonka. Isn't that enough of a name? Excuse the bad Indian accent. And he giggled. And the guy interviewing him couldn't get, why haven't you made a fortune out of this, mate? You could have turned yourself into a guru, you could have had Rolls Royces, but he didn't. And he said, if I'd have done that, if I'd have started charging for it, it would have become a religion. And that's the road to ruin. That would have ruined this technique, which has been kept in its pristine purity in Burma through these monasteries until 1848, whenever. And this lay farmer who had a cholera outbreak in his village begged a monk to teach him Vipassana to deal with the grief. Amazing how these things happen. Have you got time for one story to finish off?
Absolutely.
I think it's by Jonathan Livingston Seagull.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's a great story I love, and it's a great analogy. So it's about these creatures called rock clingers, and as to their title, that they're creatures that skulk around at the bottom of fast flowing rivers and cling to rocks. That's why they're called rock clingers. And they're going around and they're doing their thing and they're eating algae and blah 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 blah. Anyway, one young rock clinger one day started saying to his mates, he said, you know what, this is a bit of a boring life. And I said, what do you mean? Well, we're rock clingers. And he said, I know, but I don't want to just cling to rocks all my life. I want to do something exciting. And I said, well, like what? Well, let go and see where the river takes me. I said, you can't say that. It's blasphemous. We've been taught you can't do that. It'll kill you. And of course, this rebel, the more his mates said you can't do it, the more he said, well, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. Anyway, word got out and the elders got to hear about this crazy idea. And then the holders of the church, if you like, the religion, said, we're going to hold a meeting and excommunicate you. And he said, I don't care. I'm going to do it. And he named a day when he was going to do it. And the whole community of thousands of rock clingers came together and they tried to hold on to him. But he said, no, I'm going to let go. And he let go. And they all went, oh, no. Oh, how awful. And then they dared to look up to watch him get smashed against the rock and killed. And as they looked up, they saw that actually he got swept with the current and the current took him round the rocks. And he shouted down to them before he was swept out of view. And he said, it's okay. It's safe. It's amazing. And as he said that, the sunlight beamed through the river surface and kind of surrounded this rock clinger with light. And they went, oh, wow, how amazing. And they wrote this story down. And they bound it in a book. And they built a building to house this book. And they went there once a week and worshipped this book. But they never let go of the rock. I have tears when I relay it, because I feel for the part of our humanity that fears letting go. It's in me, it's in you, it's in all of us. But unless we have the courage to let go on the inside, to know that our fears are part of who we are, they're not something to be avoided, they're something to be embraced, and that we're bigger than that, then there's always a danger we'll carry on clinging to our own rock and not living the life that we could live.
Do you feel you've let go of your rock?
Never completely. That'd be fool's paradise. That'd be fool's arrogance.
Do you think there's a series of letting goes?
Constantly. Constantly. I remember when I did my fourth or fifth or sixth Vipassana, you know, because you've done one, but for those who don't, you go into this big hall and you've got a kind of 2'6" square cushion. And there's rows of them across the hall and rows of them down the hall, and each cushion's got a number. The rows going from the front where the teachers sit to the back is A, B, C, D, E, F, G, etc. And going across is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you wait in the ante room to be, when the silencer started, to be assigned your cushion. And it would be D6 or E3 or whatever. And I was waiting there, you know, waiting for my name to be called. And pretty soon near the beginning, Phillip Cox-Hynd, A3. I thought, bloody hell, that's on the front row. Oh my goodness, I'll be at the front. I'll have all the people, all the blokes behind me looking at me as though I know what I'm doing. It's always going in my head. And because I've been doing it for a while, I was at the front and I managed to sit reasonably still, but I still have the zoo that is my head going on in my own 10-day journey. And I can remember at the end of it, some guy coming up to me, he said, oh, wow. He said, thank you for being at the front. Thank you for being so still, for being such an amazing example of having found that quietness. I said, you must be joking, mate. I said, I managed to do it pretty much on the outside, but will forever be working on that stillness on the inside. And it reminded me of a quote one of the teachers I had in the program's 5-day training days. The facilitator who taught me to facilitate at one point when I was acquiring all this knowledge, but just doubting whether I had enough knowledge, enough courage to move beyond the imposter syndrome and actually do it, you know, own what I knew I could do, but hold my fears in the other hand, if you like, and still go and do it. And she said, Phillip, are you practicing to be a master? Or are you a master practicing? Are you practicing to be a master? Are you always trying to get it right? Always going for the next workshop, going for the next personal development book, going for the next fix, going for the next addiction, going for the next drug, going for the next alcohol, going for the next food, going for the next meditation, going for the next, then I'll get back, then I'll be good enough. Or I am masterful. I am my own master. I am good at some stuff. I can own that. And I will be forever practicing. And I think that's, for me, the truth. It was only when I owned being a master at facilitation, being a master at coaching, being a master at the stuff I'm talking about now, and still practicing, and still making mistakes, and still waking up before a podcast with a guy called Chris saying, oh God, what am I going to say? What about he asks me questions and I go blank? Then he'll see who I am. Then he'll see that it's this kid in short trousers from Birmingham who thinks he knows some shit. So I think we're always practicing.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful way to put it. Absolutely. In this moment, and that's all there is.
Yeah.
It's I just want to add on the Vipassana note that it's stressed so hard that it's not about organized religion. It's not about some kind of, it's just purely about, and that's why it's so popular. It's purely about the science. You are the student and you can understand for yourself. It's literally there if you want to see it.
Absolutely. You're there as an observer. You're there to observe you. You're not to observe other people. It's not about the center or the color of the walls, or that's just a vehicle. That's just a mechanism. And you take away the phone and the chat and the chit chat and the talking and all the stuff that distract us, including the eye contact, because every time I look at someone, I'm making a judgment on them. That's just the truth of being human. So you strip down everything, so the only thing left is to observe yourself. And one of the things I love about it is that he talks very powerfully about, if you've got a faith, great. This won't interfere with your faith. If you're Christian, if you're Hindu, if you're Muslim, if you're Jewish, if you're vegetarian, if you're not, if you, whatever you want to call yourself, that's great. Whatever your practice is, that's great. Whatever your belief system is, that's great. And nothing in any of that will be weakened by observing yourself, by observing your breath and observing your mind and observing your body and observing the interaction between your mind and your body. All that can ever do is enhance whatever your belief system you've got, whatever religion you've got, not take away from it. So yeah, I've had some fantastic chats on the 10th day. So folks, if you're listening, you are allowed to talk on day 10.
Mm-hmm. And it's not as strict as you're on your own in this isolated environment. You definitely are supported, but you really are also just left to it.
So you can talk to the course manager on anything practical. So you need an extra duvet or a different pillow, or the food you're getting isn't quite what you want, or they're very open. They'll talk to you completely openly on that, and that's made very clear and reinforced as well. And if you want to talk to the teachers who've practiced Vipassana for decades often, and they're chosen very carefully, then, as I say, you can book a lunchtime chat, or after the last meditation finishes at 9 p.m. You can line up. You don't have to book that. You can chat to them as well. So you're never on your own. And also, if you wanted to leave, and people sometimes do leave before the 10 days, all they ask is, please tell us you're leaving, so that we know you're safe and you're okay to go on your way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, mate, it's been fascinating talking to you and listening to you. I think you've dropped some beautiful nuggets of wisdom and truth, and it's that common thread for me, isn't it, in us all? Right. It's the human side. We are spiritual beings having a human experience.
Indeed. And we're spiritual beings in a body.
Yes.
And I think when we start to believe that our body isn't important, whatever happens when we die is up for debate. What's certain is that whilst we're here, the levels of higher mind, whether you want to call it soul or spirituality or whatever, only exists within a body. And to disconnect the body from the higher mind or even the lower mind, some Buddhist scholars have determined 139 layers of mind. I can determine about 6 in my head. And it doesn't matter, if they've got 139, great. If they've experienced it, great. I haven't experienced that, but I'm not saying it doesn't exist. But it's connecting our higher selves to our physical selves, because one without the other makes a nonsense of the physical plane we're existing in.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Thank you, Chris.
It's all good, mate. Appreciate your time. Hopefully we'll get you back on in years
Thank
to come.
you. And if anyone wants to contact me, just do so either on Instagram through Techniques for Living or techniquesforliving.com.
Yeah. Awesome. And I'll pop those links in the.
Thank you. Also, if anyone wants to read a bit about my work, then the second book I publish is still available on Amazon, and that's Mindfulness and the Art of Change by Choice. Oh, you've got the book. Yeah.
Listening.
Great.
Sorry.
Bless you. Thank you, Chris.
It's a good book.
All righty.
Right. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah. Peace.
Speak to you soon.